Stampers, this is Yana Smakula for SimonsSaysStamp.com. Welcome back for another Yippee for Yana episode. In this video, I'm sharing a different look at the Waves Builder stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. All supplies I'm using for this project are listed and linked in the video description below for your convenience. I'm a big fan of all things abstract, and abstract stamps are some of the most used stamps in my craft room. Lately, I have been playing with the Waves Builder cling background stamp from Simon, and I think it is a genius stamp because it can be used for several different looks. As you can see here, each wave is separate, allowing you to stamp it in a different color of ink. Now, this background is called Waves Builder, and obviously it was designed to create beautiful, colorful waves for a card background, and I have used it in that way in the past. But just because it is called Waves Builder doesn't mean it cannot be used as a builder for something else. Recently, I shared a card created with this background where I used the waves sections to create colorful sunset sky sections for a very abstract looking card. But the potential of this stamp set doesn't end there. You can use the waves to stamp the hills and fields for your cards, and that's what I'm doing in this video. First, I'm stamping the waves as intended, meaning I leave a gap between the sections. When you line up the individual sections of this stamp and stamp them, you end up having a small gap between each section. I quite like that gap. It adds interest and it helps to separate the individual waves. For my first background, I'm stamping the sections in various shades of green using Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated ink in colors Field, Perfection, Limelicious, Sprout, and Celery. There are more sections in this stamp, enough to cover an A2 card front, but I need to leave room at the top for a sun. So I'm not stamping all of the sections and I'm not covering the entire background, I'm just creating a partial. I have just 5 sections for this background. Another way to use this stamp is to stamp sections without the wide gaps. Now, this takes a little bit more work as you have to pay more attention to aligning the sections. I place the sections in my MISTI and I slide the section down a little bit to make sure it would touch or even overlap the section below it slightly. As you can tell, I'm stamping green hills using these waves. The first background was just an ombre one using different shades of green, but for this background, I added a yellow wave, and that resembles a hill with blooming flowers. Let's say those are yellow daffodils or yellow tulips. And I also added a light blue wave, meant to resemble a river or maybe even a lake in my landscape stamping. So even though this stamp set is designed for creating pretty waves, it can be used for so much more, especially if you are into anything abstract. What I didn't show here is also overlapping the sections. You can stamp the waves not following the order in which they are cut. This will allow you to have creative looking overlap of the sections, and it will give you even more ways to create more abstract backgrounds. Having finished stamping, I trimmed these panels first to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I later trimmed them to a much smaller size to 3.5 by 4 3/4 inches. You can see I left the top of both panels free from stamping as I planned to add an ink blended sun. For this, I used the SLIMLINE Scene Builder Stencil and I ink blended the sun in Sunbeam ink, concentrating more ink in the center and less around the edges as if you have the sun fade into the background. The second panel needed a little bit of masking as I wanted to have the sun lower on the horizon line and nearly setting. So I stamped that top wave on a piece of masking paper and I fussy cut the mask to be able to ink blend the sun partially on this background. I used the same Sunbeam ink for the sun and then also added a little bit more darker yellow using the citrine ink on the horizon line. This gave me an absolutely beautiful sun for this background. With abstract backgrounds like this, you can do any sentiment you want. I stamped a simple hello, sending you a hug on one background, and then miss you on the other background. I had to cut the miss you stamp apart as it was too long for this background and I wanted it to be a 2-line sentiment here. Now, if you want, you can also add some subtle stamping to the background. I personally love to stamp birds flying in the sky, especially overlapping the sun. You can also stamp clouds and maybe some other elements too. I pulled out a few stamp sets here to show you various options for complementing these backgrounds. I have the Hello Sunshine stamp with the pretty clouds, the Your Light stamp with the seagulls and then the light, and then Seas and Greetings stamp, and that's the one that I used to stamp the birds. I foam mounted the panels onto A2 white side folding card bases and finished my card by adding a few silver gems. I hope you feel inspired to create and will give this idea a try. If you make a card inspired by this video, we'd love it if you shared your project online and tagged us on social media. We always enjoy seeing what you make. Thanks so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.